All right, everybody. We are back again for another episode of The Coach's Compass. We're on season 3. Don't know what episode. Just continue to roll. Continue to bring on cool guests from all across the world. Now, remember, hit that like, subscribe, comment button down below so we continue to have this thing grow. Continue to bring on cool guests from all across the world. But today, I got another special guest with me. I got Coach John with over 12 years of experience in the private and university level. Primarily worked with hockey and rugby athletes, but now is passionate about helping coaches through the internships and assistant coach roles and sharing as much knowledge as possible online and in person. Coach John, thank you and welcome to the Coach's Compass, man.
Well, thanks so much for having me on. Really, just appreciate getting a chance to talk about whether it's the things I've done over the course of my career or just how I can use that to help other people too.
Awesome. And so before we get into it, I think the biggest question that I think a lot of us coaches always ask is, what got you started in this industry and how do you get to where you're at now?
Yeah, so I think I followed like a mostly similar path to a few other people in the industry where it's you start out as a bit of an athlete and then my story is more I was never the most physically talented. I was never or the most like technically or tactically gifted. So the gym was always a place where it was a lot easier for me to see the inputs turn into outputs. And over the course of some injuries that kept me out of kind of competitive sport, the gym just always kind of became home. And that was something I knew I wanted to make part of my life. It's funny, I always do like a presentation annually for like an undergraduate class, and that's one of the questions. It's why do you do this sort of thing? And I it's really easy to overcomplicate it. We could think about it's like, oh, it's because I got hurt and I really love the weight room, and it was this thing. It made me feel like I could do that better, and maybe I could help other people. I think at the end of the day, it's I think for a lot of us, we just like love being in the gym and being able to help people and be around people at its core, and that's something I've tried to. It's we're all kind of like lucky in a way. We kind of like back our way into something that's so cool. Like we get to just hang out with people, connect with them, and exercise and help them get better at the same time too. That's sort of where it started. From like a more detailed progression, it was working, through my undergraduate, just transitioning into a graduate assistant role at the University of British Columbia, and then we were having an overhaul with the strength and conditioning department as I was starting. So I got the opportunity to be really early in the program they set up there, which set me up to have a lot of experience with a lot of different sports. At some point, probably working with all 26 varsity teams in some way, shape, or form. While at the concurrently working on the private side, I think it was one of those things where I just got bombarded with so much experience so quickly that it was such a rush, and that kind of like kept me rolling for a while. And you get this, I was like, I like to think of coaching, it's like you almost get like a short-term high where it's like you start and you're like, oh man, this is so exciting. It's like these sessions are so fun. I'm able to like teach people and do stuff. And then it just that kind of kept me rolling until you get to this almost like long-term high where it's holy crap, I'm like actually doing something like this means something to people. You see a kid go from, first year to fourth year, and you've been able to see who they become along that journey at the university level, or you see a kid start in high school and then graduate, or maybe it's a kid signs like a professional contract, or maybe it's just one of your like general population clients. You see how their life has changed over the course of you working with them, and you kind of get that. So that's sort of how I got started, and then what's really like kept me doing it is I just like love what I do, and then to be able to keep doing it has been just so easy.
Yeah, it's always fun to kind of see the progression that what you're doing has helped somebody else go along the way and maybe miss some of the hiccups that you went through, like you said, going through the injuries and stuff like that. But 12 years of experience in the industry is a lot, man. Because some people, come in and they leave and then they come back. There's that in between. But where do you see the strength and conditioning industry right now? Is it trending in the right direction, with a lot of the coaches kind of starting to speak to each other and work together, or are we kind of degressing when we have all this technology and stuff?
I mean, that's a good question. Like, I'd like to maybe like younger me would have been a little bit more like critical, and oh no, there's always something wrong going on. But I'm trying to err on the side of being an optimist. It's one, if there's so much information available, I hope that people are able to use it in the right way. And I mean, even just like to be able to connect with somebody is like one of the best uses of it. It's both things. Like I know it's never one thing. It's like it's never always going up and it's never always going down. At the same time as it's easier than ever to connect with people, it's easier than ever to judge someone without any context. So it's so easy to see all the pages online and be like, oh, man, no one knows what they're doing. It's like just as bad as ever. No one's, updated their program since 1992. All these coaches are like, and you always hear about the bad stories too. It's you hear about the stories of the like the strength coach that, was like really mean to the kids over, in wherever area, or you hear about the one that everyone got hurt. It's like you don't hear about the cases where it's, all the kids really like them and everyone stayed healthy for most of the year. It gets sensationalized that way. And then in terms of like young kids coming up, I hope it is like trending up. It's tough. I know from an organizational standpoint, it's hard and I think this is maybe just outside of even strength and conditioning, but it's hard to get somebody to do for maybe like context. Like my background when I started, I worked, as I'm sure like a lot of people did that are around my age. It's like you work a lot for free and you work
Yeah.
really, really long hours. So like I even like in saying I have 12 years of experience, I probably crammed about 5 into the first 2. It's there was like to give an example of what my early days looked like, it's like, I'd get up at 4. I didn't have a car because I couldn't afford one. So I bust out to the gym that I worked at for, like 90 minutes. And I'd read like Elite FTS or T Nation articles or something first thing, or listen to a podcast, get to the gym, train a bunch of private clients until, around midday, take the bus all the way back out to the university, kind of like another hour and a bit the other way, doing the same thing, like probably thinking more about coaching and training, train, 2 to 4 teams and work out too until, 8 p.m. at night. And then, you're just sitting there exhausted. And then you and all the other coaches that have been there all day, then you all start talking shop with each other until it's like, man, we should probably go home, to do this again tomorrow. And it's I don't know how much those things are as readily available now. I'm sure they still are, but I don't think like to play both sides. I don't think I should have done that. Like that sounds, it sounds terrible. Like if a young university student came up to me and told me that was what their day looked like, I would tell them to set some serious boundaries and not, like maybe cut one of those things out. You're going to be okay. And so, but on the flip side, obviously it gave me a lot of experience and a lot of reps of coaching. And so I think it's both sides. It's like I think kids, I sound like such an old man. Kids today, like
Trust me, I feel you.
it's kids today, it's like you have these like they're able to set better boundaries than I think we were, where
Mhm.
it's, hey, yeah, I'm not going to work every long weekend for free if that's okay. I have other commitments and a life and other stuff. It's they're more aware of like this idea of balance, which I think is good net, but it probably is tough for us to hear because we went through those periods of imbalance, and I think it keeps reiterating too because it sounds I'll have coaches who are 5 to 10 years younger than me talk about kids who were in their undergrad the same way I would have talked about them when they were in their undergrad. It's like, no one cares. They're just not putting in all the work. And it's like, well, we said the same thing about you. So I don't know what the loop is here, but I think it's maybe just the way we keep viewing kids. It's like the whole point is that of us having done all that stuff is I always like to think of like mentorship or, being like the next stage as whatever we're doing, it's helping the next generation go further faster. So if the next generation of, coaches is still stuck in the same things that we were, whether that's like working too hard and burning out and needing to change fields or letting their egos kind of rise up. So maybe they aren't changing their programs. Maybe they aren't critically thinking about what other people are doing. Maybe they aren't communicating with others, then that's like more our failure than it is theirs. It's you want them to be able to hopefully not learn the lessons that you did a little bit faster so that hopefully the what you call it the field advances further. You could say it's them as people. It's like they're able to do that job just as well, in so that hopefully the next generation does the exact same thing. It's always tough. It's because it's both sides. It is tough to see how things like continue to advance and which direction it's going, because it's always easy to highlight the negative stuff, but I hope that we are trending positively because we've done so much to move in that direction, even over the course of like me just being a coach.
Right. I mean, it's the same kind of way of like myself being a parent. Like we talk about kids getting a
Mhm.
little bit softer and spending too much time on technology. We didn't have this back in our days. We spent more time playing outside, but realistically, we're the parents, and we kind of like we're giving the kids the technology because we want them to be quiet, and we're putting it in their face. It's almost the same thing in like coaching. Like, are we giving them too many ways out and not making them do as many hours as we did before, or has it just become an easier path, trailblazing, to make it a quicker process for them to not have to spend so many hours like we did? And it's a tough road to like figure out what that balance is between, do they spend 12-hour days of not getting paid but still having to take an hour bus ride somewhere, or is there a simpler way to get them to get where they need to get to in a faster pace? So I don't know the answer to that question. It's a really tricky one, but I definitely think that it's trending in, I'll play devil's advocate too, I think it's trending in the right direction with a lot of coaches being able to speak to each other. Like you said, there's way more access to each other through social media. Like, yes, there are the negatives on social media. Yes, there's some of the things that you post on social media are just the highlights, right? It's not just like the full workout that you're actually doing. But I think everybody now has access to be able to speak to one another and ask each other what they're doing and how they got to an athlete to that point, and what they're doing in their workouts, and what they're even doing with their general population. So I think, like we both said, it's a hard field to play. Like where the things are headed to, we all just hope it's headed in the right direction. But I think it really helps having coaches just being able to speak to each other and share the knowledge throughout it all. Now, when you first started in the industry, though, or where you are now, what do you wish you knew back then that you know now?
It's really like it's funny you're asking that question. So that's kind of like I alluded to. I gave that presentation to an undergraduate class today, and that's one of the things I always sort of bring up, exactly that. And the point I made then to them, it's like, so the stuff that I wish I knew, like if you could talk to yourself 10 years ago, what would you say? First of all, 10 years ago, I wouldn't listen to shit that I have to say now. Like I would be like, no, you don't know anything. I probably think I was way smarter than me now. And so I don't expect any young person to, listen to whatever I have to say to a point. That being said, I always kind of make this, whenever you're working with high school kids, it's like, I know there's going to be times when stuff you say, and it's not just the jokes, like there are things you will say that will go over their head in terms of like perspective that you have or thoughts about the world, whatever it is. There's some that it might not resonate with them because they're young and they don't have the experience yet. There's a certain degree of like unteachable lessons that you have to go through. And I always hope that the things that I say, they'll like ripple effect through them, so that maybe, a few years from now, they'll be like, oh yeah, John said that thing like 2 years ago. And now it kind of makes sense. And then the other one too, it's like, the mistakes that I made along the way, I think this is so true of anyone. It's when you ask people about the mistakes they've made, they very often will look at them fondly as ways that they shape their experience. It's like, so yeah, I probably shouldn't have, worked 12 hours a day sometime. That's dumb. But it's like, like it made me the coach I am today, kind of thing. Or like, maybe I shouldn't have, said yes to whatever that, other gig was. It's like, oh, but maybe I learned something there. Like, maybe I shouldn't have done that thing where I, got injured. But it's like, then that like refined how you think about knees. The biggest piece of advice that I hope that I would listen to would be to stop and breathe every now and then, because it's really easy when you're in it, and especially when you do something that you're really passionate about, to get lost and just keep going. You get so stuck kind of in your day to day and these urgent things that are still important, that you don't take time to step back and, one, just like enjoy where you are, or two, even be able to look at it from a bird's eye view and maybe see it's like, oh, maybe I could do that a little differently, or I could do that a little differently. So taking time to pause, I think, mixing in some kind of non-strength and conditioning read would be great. If I could tell that to me back in, my early 20s, I think I read nothing but training articles, journal articles, and then like books about coaching in my downtime. And then you talk to other coaches about coaching while you're, at the gym, and then outside the gym too. So it's something, if I learned how to be financially literate from like my early 20s, I don't think I'd ever have to work again now. Something
That
like
is true. That is very
that.
true. And I think it's crazy that you say like think about other things outside of coaching. Why is that important? Because when you get into this field, it's like you want to just be the best coach you can be. So you're looking at all the coaches that came before you, and you're reading the stuff that they put out. You're watching, listening to podcasts, you're watching YouTube. It's like you're trying to do everything you can to be a better coach. But I think there's a missing piece in there that we forget about in life, and like you talk about, like financial literacy. Like, hey, like what are you doing with that money that you do make if you are getting paid in those early days, to kind of reinvest in yourself and help yourself get further ahead, so you're not in our 40s, 50s, continuing to be on the floor coaching strength and conditioning all the time, even though we still love it. Like I'm sure most of us would do it if we could do it for free, like you did in the early days. We probably would still do it. But how do we make it more successful? And you talk about reading stuff outside. Why is that? Why is that important?
I think because it broadens your perspective. Like it makes you more of a whole person and a whole coach, however you want to think of it. It's also to give yourself maybe an outlet. And if I'm being, for myself, it would be any subject matter outside. For anyone, it's like if you still like to read for fun, or if you're like into, fiction and fantasy, like anything, like still lean into that, because I think it just gives you a more well-rounded perspective on everything. I mean, it makes you a more interesting person. You have more than one interest, which is it's really easy to get, and kind of to my point about when you love something, it's easy to get lost in it. That's somewhere where I think people who that's the it's like, have you ever heard the quote, when you do what you love, you'll work harder than you ever have. Or sorry, no, I'm phrasing it wrong. When you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. It's like the actual extension of that is like that's nonsense. You will work so hard, but it'll be easy to work hard.
Yes,
And so
exactly.
it's if you have these like other interests and other pieces to who you are, then that can help you to relax and chill out so that you can approach the work with, I think, more energy. Or when you're working in the private sector too, when you're working with general population clients, it's you don't like they probably don't want to talk about exercise and training. They want to talk about the news, or like they want to know who you are. They're hopefully you have more depth to you than that. And I always really like the analogy of if you think about the way like training models work, like when we see somebody for their gen prep phase or something, we're trying to like broaden out their movement experiences again, and like so do more things with them. And I kind of think of people as sort of the same way. It's like there's athletic development sort of is shaped like a diamond when you think about it. So it's like, when we have a young athlete, they don't have a lot of stuff they know how to do, and they play different sports, they train more, they do a lot more things, and it widens out a lot. And so you get more and more experiences. And then as you specialize and pick maybe one sport, it kind of narrows back out again. And people are kind of the same way. And so like if you think about coaches, it's like we don't have a lot of experience like working with people. We're just like kind of doing our thing. And it's like you want to broaden out a little bit, maybe, have more different experiences and places to draw from. And that could be within your field, but it's just overall like to make yourself like a broader and wider person, so that when you like narrow out again, it's like you get in your competitive season of just working. It's like that's okay to specialize, but there's going to be times, just like when we see an athlete at the start of an off season, it's like then there's going to be downtime too, where it's like you want to broaden out and widen out your experiences. So read other things that aren't about strength and conditioning. Look at material that has that just like you're just doing it for fun. Like not everything has to be a growth perspective.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And sometimes we just get lost in the sauce, right? You just
Yes.
want to constantly get better at your craft, and it's just like, hey, coaching is what I do. That's what I'm going to be about.
Yeah.
Where is Coach John headed in this whole thing? Like, where do you see yourself, in the next 5, 10 years in the industry or just in life?
That's a good question. I mean, sometimes I don't know where I'm going to be 6 months from now. So 5 years is a
I agree with you.
moonshot. But in 5 years, I would love to have something where I'm able to do a lot of what I'm doing now. I'm still able to coach people that I feel like I'm able to provide help to them with the skill set that I have. So whether that's somebody that has, an injury or works in sports performance or just likes my particular brand of humor, and like that could be like a Gen Pop client that like we just get on and we love to hang. I'd love to have a couple of those. I'd love to have a few groups and teams where it's my skill set of being able to manage a room is really appreciated, and it's something where I feel like I'm contributing a lot. So if I can do a little bit of coaching there, but I know somewhere where I should probably be spending more time, and I hope I keep spending more time, is on helping other people find what that is for them. And that could be like within coaching, it's like, you find the populations you want to work with, you find different training styles, and you keep your mind open so that you can be a better and better coach than I am, and eventually maybe help somebody find that they can be a better manager of people than I am. And what that looks like, I'm not 100% sure right now. I would love if that were on the private side. I would love it if that was my own facility, and you have a bunch of like-minded coaches who are working with you, and ones who are maybe a little bit younger, but we're all still peers. I see it as, and we're all just helping each other kind of rise up, and the maybe that looks like me being involved through a university and being able to work with some undergraduate students there. I've had a lot of student shadow as assistant coaches over the years, and that's always been something where I've kind of in the same way as when you work with young athletes and you realize after a while it's like, wow, that actually like made an impact on them. You know, when you see them years later, there's times when I'll look back on people that shadowed me for, 3 months, years ago, and see where they are in their career. My jaw will hit the floor just, based off it's like where they are and what that meant to them and how that kind of shaped their experience, whether they went into physio, whether they went into med school, or whether they stayed in the field. So it's doing a little bit more of that, I think, like focusing my energy more on people who are trying to be a coach as well as keeping my own coaching going. And hopefully that kind of carries into how I'm able to communicate that message online. Like to the leverage point we talked about earlier, like technology is great that I'm able to, I mean, connect with somebody who is sometimes across the world, but
Yeah.
uh, not in the same city as me, at least. Like it's very cool to be able to do that. And if I weren't posting as much as I am, or if I weren't taking the time to do that and try and be open with my message and my thoughts, things like this wouldn't come up. So it's hopefully doing a little bit more of this so that the idea that you can keep growing in this field is possible, that you're able to connect with people everywhere just as much as you are in person. And yeah, I think that would be maybe the constant actually is connection. If that's hopefully something where if in 5 years from now, as hopefully I'm just as connected to the people that I'm working with as clients or as athletes and the people that I'm working with as colleagues and everyone in the rest of my life too.
You gotta love seeing your coaching tree, like where people you've worked with years ago, 3 months ago that were underneath you, or maybe your peer that you kind of help coach up a little bit and seeing where they're going. It's almost like, in the NFL, NBA, and everything like that, seeing the assistant coach now becoming head coach, even surpass you and become better and open up their own facilities and stuff like that. It's always fun to see, those things going on. And also, like you said, being able to connect with other coaches. That's really how we started this whole coaches compass thing, is reaching out to other coaches that are on Instagram that are kind of doing really cool work and just hearing their stories and getting them out there and, seeing each other connect with each other throughout other experiences too. On top of that, what is something you would like to hear us ask our next guest?
That's a good question. I always like the idea of like something that you feel like you've changed your mind on. So, or somewhere you feel like you've grown. Because usually it takes some humility and critical thinking to be able to change your mind itself and to be able to look back on what you were doing versus what you are doing. So yeah, what's something you've changed your mind on or somewhere you feel like you've grown, something along those lines.
And what would you say is for you?
I would say it's over the course of my career, it's definitely, I used to think this, excuse me, uh, that same kind of line that it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And what I've sort of realized is maybe a step even further along that it's not just about where you end up and it's just not about your kind of process or your day to day. It's about the people that you do it with along the way. So the people that you're working with on those same two tiers I was talking about of like your clients, athletes or colleagues, coworkers, everyone around you that you're doing life with, like that's something I have grown to appreciate progressively more. I think it's easy to take for granted when you're younger and get, lost in the sauce of like I'm learning, I'm working, I'm grinding, all this. But it's all just life. And
Right.
that's somewhere where I've tried to be a little bit more grounded, is to appreciate that it's really just it's the people you do this with and it's who's along for the journey.
Coach, I appreciate you even stepping in here today and joining us for the Coaches Compass and dropping another episode of just knowledge on how this industry works and what you've been through yourself and just keeping it open and completely 100 with us. So that is it for the day, guys. We're out of here. Remember, hit that like, subscribe, comment button, and we'll be sure to drop this episode.
Thanks so much. Yeah.